tomorrow night. We got Eagles and Giants right here on 97.3 ESPN, with the winner essentially being in first place in the NFC East. Dallas at 2-4. The winner tomorrow night would be 2-5 if you're the Giants, 2-4-1 if you are Philadelphia. So let's ask Jason Fitz. We are in an area, Jay Fitz, where people embrace the process and said, I don't want to make the playoffs. Let's be bad and get good players. I subscribe to that in the NBA. In the NFL, not so much. So if you're an Eagles fan, should you want to make the playoffs in this horrible NFC East?
Well, look, frankly, first and foremost, I always want to make the playoffs. I'll be real about that. Second, I'm with you. Typically, I don't want to tank for anybody because, as I've said for years, bad teams are normally bad because they draft poorly. So why are they suddenly going to figure it out just because they have the top pick in the draft? The one thing that I think makes the Eagles' case so difficult, though, is they're facing so many injuries, right? So, if you believe that this roster, were it that everybody healthy, would be in a much different situation, then maybe there's that mindset. But do we also believe that this roster can't get healthy and put it together in the playoffs? I mean, who knows at that point, right? I still believe that Doug Peterson can coach. I still believe that Carson Wentz can play quarterback. So I want to give myself a shot at any point because you never know when a wild card could go on a run. So I'm just not willing to mail out in a season, especially in 2020 when, you have no idea also in the playoffs what the other team's going to look like every week because of COVID-19.
That's a great point, is by the time we get to January, who knows where this world will be. So just try to roll the dice and get in. We saw the Cowboys dumpster fire on your network, ESPN, the other night on Monday Night Football, and now the players just coming out, the coaching staff totally unprepared. They don't teach. They aren't good at their jobs. They don't have any sense of adjusting on the fly. Is the Cowboys dumpster fire real?
Oh, yeah. Their season's done. And I'll tell you, that doesn't come based on anything on the talent side of it. That comes based on those comments you just mentioned. And a buddy of mine, who was a writer for years, said years ago, when the locker room selves mode. And I think that's real. In my experience, when athletes start throwing coaches under the bus and coaches start throwing athletes under the bus, what you're really seeing there is somebody saying, hey, keep giving me my checks. It's not my fault that this has gone awry. And that is a very, very, very difficult tonal moment to put back in the bottle. I don't think you can walk that back. So the fact that Cowboys players are already in protect themselves mode, throw coaches under the bus mode, the fact that Jerry Jones has come out and said, hey, I think we have talent on defense. They just need to be coached better. I don't think that toothpaste can go back into the bottle. And that's why I'm out on the Cowboys for the rest of the year, because that level of dysfunction is going to lead to a lot of backbiting.
Well, not to get too long-term here, but you just hired this guy, Mike McCarthy. What do you do if you are the Cowboys? Are you stuck with this? Do you scrap it already and then you go in a new direction? I mean, these are some pretty powerful words to hear coming out of the locker room this early in the first year.
Yeah, and that's a great question. 99% of the time, I don't think you know who a coach is in 1 year. But Mike McCarthy's had his shot in the past. I questioned the hire to begin with, and now all we see is Mike McCarthy still seems to not know how to get the most out of his guys. I mean, I don't want to oversimplify here, guys, but especially because part of the head coaching interview is, A, what are you going to do with our quarterback? And then B, what staff are you going to build and why are they good for our roster? That's a big part of what coaches are interviewed on. So even if you believe that this isn't a Mike McCarthy issue and it's a coordinator issue, those are all coaches that Mike McCarthy fought for at some point. So, that in and of itself is a huge part of why a guy gets a job, and it's a huge part of how you judge the first year of a coaching staff. So when you're starting to talk about change already, possibly for assistant coaches, that's at the feet of McCarthy. It's going to be difficult because the Cowboys, in my mind, can end up going 3-13 or 4-12, which won't put them high enough to get a replacement for Dak in the draft, but it will put them high enough that they're going to have to answer real questions about McCarthy. I think he's shown the door.
Now, where do you stand? Because I'm anti, these people who think that you need to change the playoff structure if a NFC East team is really bad. I mean, it goes in cycles. We've seen losing records win. Yes, this division's really bad, but are you for changing the playoffs for teams like this that win the division and don't belong in?
No, and because where do we draw the line, right? We could reseed everybody and start to give new playoff seedings when we start based on record, but then you're going to have a really, really prominent conversation in the next couple of years about strength of schedule, and I don't think the NFL wants to open that door. I mean, what do we do if there's a 10-6 division winner, but there's an 11-5 wild card, but that 11-5 wild card is like the Patriots feasting on a bad East every single year during, Belichick and Brady's heyday. So how are they going to judge those things together? Like, that's the can of worms you open. The NFL has a very simple, clear-cut system, and if once every decade it means that a really bad team gets home field advantage that they shouldn't, I'm all in for that, because that's once in a blue moon, as opposed to constant seeding conversations that will become about who played a tougher schedule. I don't think the NFL wants that.
Jason Fitz, Spain and Fitz, 7-9 on 97.3 ESPN. Your take on Tua getting inserted as the starting quarterback for that Dolphins team, which all of a sudden is not only in the wild card mix, they're in the division mix.
And that's why I can't make it make sense, guys. I mean, I get that Tua is going to be spectacular. I believe that. I believe he's going to be a great quarterback, and I'm excited to watch the kid play. But that being said, the Dolphins spent more money on their secondary than any other team this offseason. They've spent the second most on the defensive side of the ball of anybody this offseason. They were spending money to rebuild this team to be competitive right now, which, guess what? They happen to be, and Fitzpatrick is playing well. So I don't understand the move when you have momentum, which, by the way, I think is the toughest thing to get in 2020 and the easiest thing to lose. When you've got it and you're in the playoff conversation, we don't know if the Patriots are any good. Frankly, we don't know if the Bills, after 4-0, but now they've lost to the two actually good teams they played, are the Bills for real or a house of cards? Like, why Miami would make this decision when they're in the thick of the playoff hunt, and one rookie moment, one game where Tua just sort of has that rookie step back could be the reason that Miami misses the playoffs. I just wouldn't take that risk when Fitzpatrick's playing that well.
I agree completely. It definitely shocked me when I saw the news. But now that we're talking around the league here, we have a segment called Who's In, Who's Out, where we look at, the division leaders. And I put, for the first time this week, in the AFC North, the Pittsburgh Steelers over the Ravens. Do you think that that's possible? How do you view this Pittsburgh team compared to the Ravens?
So the funny thing is I picked the Steelers to go to the playoffs this year. I thought they'd be spectacular. I also thought, though, Baltimore would keep being Baltimore. And there has been a little bit of a regression, and I use that word carefully around Lamar Jackson because he's such a great player. Nobody's going to take anything away, but things haven't looked as easy for the offense this year for Baltimore as we expected, and things have looked easy for the Steelers. And you could argue that they haven't played a bunch of great teams, but frankly, guys, let's loop it in with last year. We saw the Steelers, if there had been 7 teams in the playoffs last year, like there is in each conference, this year the Steelers would have gone to the playoffs with Duck Hodges. Think about that. So now they get Ben back, and we had to know that was going to make a difference. That's why I thought the Steelers would, frankly, be a playoff team. But I'm with you. I think the Steelers have every shot at winning the North right now because they are just playing so clean. And I believe that they're going to go in and just absolutely dismantle the Titans on Sunday, and then the hype train is going to go to a different level.
That's big stuff there. You'll hear that game here on 97.3 ESPN. The Steelers and the Titans coverage begins at 12:30. And level of interest in the World Series.
It's that's such a tough question. I think I had a ton of interest in last night. Let's see how it goes through the course of the process. I mean, there's so many games going on in so many sports right now. It's a little hard, but we got sort of a dream matchup, and so much was on the line for Clayton Kershaw. I think that gave us that moment. And then you have Mookie Betts being Mookie Betts, and everybody sort of can fall in love with it. You can fall in love with the way the Dodgers have suffered so much to try and get to this point, their process, or you can fall in love with sort of the Rays and the way the analytics have driven their roster construction. Like, there are so many great stories, but at the end of the day, is that going to cut through, a huge college football weekend where the Big Ten's back in action? I don't know. I mean, I think right now we begged for sports to come back, and now we've got so much of it that I think there's a little bit of fatigue from some people. And then on top of that, there's a little bit of, okay, where am I going to put my interest also in a year where we'd be just ignorant to not acknowledge that politics have such a focus from so many people. So, I feel like my level of interest is high for this World Series because I'm rooting for the Dodgers fan base to finally get what they want. But at the same time, I don't know that there's a ton of national interest like there could be.
Yeah, I'm definitely all in on this, more than I ever have before, and I think it's because the Sixers aren't involved and the Flyers aren't involved, so, more of my focus is game by game and what's happening. But, there are a lot of baseball fans, and I saw this specifically last night, that were, bragging and boasting about how the Game 7 ratings were way better than the NBA Finals. And I just think, I'm not trying to downplay that. I think it's good that the numbers were up in those Game 7 moments for baseball, a sport that we all claim is dying. But to compare it to when the NBA is at its absolute worst, I feel like that has to be part of this equation as well.
Yeah, and look, I mean, for all of the conversation about the NBA, I will say this, at some point, the Lakers, the Heat, I thought it was a great matchup. I was stoked for it, but people aren't used to watching the NBA Finals this late in the year, and I do believe that habits play into viewing. So while the Major League Baseball season has been strange, it's still giving you a World Series that's close to when we're used to getting those things, right? We're still talking about October baseball. We've never had to sit there and talk about October NBA Finals. So I think there's a little bit of habit viewing. And then, frankly, as everybody got into the football season, I mean, I do believe that there's less eyeballs. So people are making a big deal about it. I don't know if it's really that big a deal. I do know this. The NBA digital numbers and streaming numbers have been fantastic. I don't think the league's worried about anything. And everybody's trying to turn this into one sport versus the other when, frankly, as inundated as we are right now, we should just be thankful we're getting anything. I don't think there's a long-term problem for the NBA. I don't think there's a long-term win for Major League Baseball. I just think that this is one of those years.
All right, so you got 1-4-1 Philly against 1-5 Giants. It's a important game in the East. So if you're here, are you watching the football game or are you going presidential debate tomorrow night?
Oh, yeah. Well, not presidential debate taking place in Nashville, actually. So you would think that I'd be all in on that. No, I'm watching Thursday night football. Look, what's worse than bad football? The only thing worse than bad football is bad politics. Just watching, two idiots go at it, that's not my thing. So I'd rather watch 106, quick math, 53 times 2 idiots go at it on a football field. So, I'll go all in on on Eagles, Giants. It's a big game. One of those teams is suddenly going to find themselves in the thick of all of it, which is disgusting to say, but at least, football has a winner and loser at the end of the day, and I don't feel dirty.
Unless you're the Eagles and you get a tie. If they get another tie, that could help them. They would be 1-4-2. Jason Fitz.
Never mind. That's what I'm rooting for now. Give me a tie in the NFL. Oh, yes, I'll take it all day long.
When they went for 2 against the Ravens last week at 30-28, I said it's so apropos in 2020 for the Eagles to get the 2-point conversion and have the second. Has a team tied twice in a season? I don't remember that happening. And that was like so bound to happen, but it doesn't, and they fall short against the Ravens. But tomorrow night, you can hear the game right here. He's Jason Fitz. Spain and Fitz airs 7 to 9 on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, Jay.
You guys are the best. Have a great week.